Opera for Beginners. Hello, and welcome to Opera for Beginners. At this time, we're going to take you through a quick journey introducing you to opera, to the wonderful, fascinating world of opera. Sort of an Opera 101, if you will. My name is Gregory Hopkins, and I am the Artistic Director for Harlem Opera Theater. It may seem to you that the words Harlem and opera don't fit together well in the same sentence. Harlem being known for jazz and bebop and many other kinds of music. I'm here to tell you that there was an opera house in Harlem, the Harlem Opera House on 125th Street, more than 120 years ago. That opera house was built for Oscar Hammerstein, as in Rodgers and Hammerstein fame. They made quite a splash on Broadway with their fascinating and wonderful plays and theater pieces. Opera is somewhat similar to Broadway in that instead of saying their lines, the opera singers would sing their parts. So if I were to ask, "Hello, how are you?" In an opera, I might sing, "Hello, how are you?" So you see, the words are sung instead of spoken. At this time, I would like to share with you a little piece from a concert that we did a few years ago at the Schaumburg. In this particular excerpt, you will hear three voices, one woman and two men. You'll get to hear a little bit, just a tiny little bit of what a soprano sounds like, a high woman's voice, a tenor sounds like a high man's voice, and a baritone, a sort of middle of the road men's voice. Stay tuned. For how many of you is this your first foray into opera? Hands. Okay, just a few. Well, I'm going to treat us all like we're novices tonight, and this is a new form. Can I ask our artists to come out? We have first a soprano, and soprano is the highest of the women's mature voices. Now this is Liz. Show us kind of what a soprano sounds like, please. Now, do any of you know the names of any famous African-American operatic sopranos? Leontine Price, can I get another? I hear Kathleen Battle, Jessie Norman. We usually pull those two names together. Now, in opera, sopranos are usually the love interest. They're usually the girl with a problem. And the one they look for to solve that problem is the tenor. Tenors are usually the heroes and the love interests of the sopranos. Now give us an idea of what a tenor sounds like. Now, a tenor is the highest of the mature men's voices. Okay, now, it's right to applaud, because I don't think very many of us could do that. Now, in unmature or immature men, you do have boy sopranos and boy altos, like they used to have in our very famous boys' choir of Harlem. But once men hit puberty, the voices drop and they become tenors, unless they've been castrated, baritones, and basses. Now we have a baritone coming before us. Baritones are sort of the intermediate, not very low, I should say not too low, not too high, not as high as the tenor, not as low as the basses, right there in the middle. Baritones are usually somebody's father, or the villain. Now, in this case, it would be a little bit difficult for him to be either one of their fathers because he's the youngest one up here. So you'll have to use your imaginations a little bit. Let's hear a little bit about what a baritone sounds like. Okay. But even though many of you maybe have never been to see an opera outside of what we do here at Harlem Opera Theater, everybody has heard of soap opera, haven't you? Soap opera. Now, good evening, everyone. Good evening. Now, if I were doing an opera, instead of standing here talking to you, I would say, good evening. In other words, I would sing what I was going to say instead of speaking. Now, I said good evening to you. Let me hear you say it back to me. So you see there with opera, you use your voices to tell the story instead of just acting and saying the words like they do in soap opera. Bernard Holcomb is going to sing for you now. The aria is from the opera Otello. Now there are two other versions of Otello that are probably more famous than this Rossini. One is the play Otello, written by Shakespeare. There are two African Americans, one in our current times, James Earl Jones, who made a name for himself as a wonderful Otello.
Most potent, grave, and reverend signors, my very noble and approved good masters, that I have taken away this good man's daughter, it is most true. True. I've married her.
And an historical Otello, Paul Robeson, who was the first African American to appear in an all-white cast in the play Otello by Shakespeare.
It is the cause. It is the cause, my soul. Let me not name it to you, you chaste stars. It is the cause.
And then we have Verdi's version of Otello, the opera, which is a little bit more famous than Rossini's. Now that might seem like a strange Italian name, or maybe it seems like spaghetti sauce to you. But Rossini's music, I don't think, will be completely unfamiliar to you. That is the William Tell, that's the name of the opera, Overture, written by Rossini. Bernard is going to sing for you Assi per voi from Otello by Rossini. Rossini's music is characterized by fireworks, lots of fast-moving passages and extremes of range and dynamic.
Say
Chevalier de Saint-Georges was a very, very famous and prolific African-American violinist and composer who lived in around the same time as Mozart. He was Afro-Brazilian and had a wonderful success as both a composer and a violinist. And I'm just trying to show you that for those of us who are of African descent, classical music is not so far away from it, or not as far away from it as you might think. I would also like to make you aware of Alexander Pushkin, who is considered the father of Russian literature. Pushkin's grandfather was a slave who was presented from the Sultan of Turkey to Peter the Great, a slave. Alexander Pushkin wound up becoming the father of modern Russian literature and is to the Russians what Shakespeare is to those of us who speak English. Alexander Pushkin wrote more than 25 plays that were set to music and became operas. And then a little bit closer to our time, a little more than 100 years ago, William Grant Still was born, an African American, and he lived and worked right here in Harlem. He is accredited with so many firsts to his name. William Grant Still was the first African American to conduct a major symphony. He was the first African American to write an opera that was performed by a major opera company. He was the first African American to write a symphony performed by a major symphony orchestra. A lot of firsts for him. So we have a great deal to be proud of. I would like to present to you now the next singer. Miss Kiane Richardson is going to sing the beautiful aria Caro Nome from Rigoletto by Verdi. Verdi is one of the principal composers of Italian opera. In this aria, she is just so overwhelmed with the person that she thinks is Walter Malde. He has come to her as an alias when in actuality, he's the Duke. And he fawns over her, doing all of the things that her father has warned her about in a man. Listen to Kiane as she sings about her newfound love. Caro Nome.
Thank you.
There are so many opportunities in opera besides the wonderful singing. Some of the obvious ones are those who play in the orchestra, and then the conductor, one who leads the orchestra. But in addition to that, we have superluminaries, people who may be on the stage that won't sing at all. We can have dancers. Many grand operas have ballet in them. And if you go to an opera like Aida, in addition to all of those elements, you will also see elephants and camels. So opera has got a lot of things. In addition, there's the technology, the sound people, the people that make the sets, the people that put the sets in, the people that control where the props are. So you might consider an opera career even though you're not a singer. There's a lot to do and a lot to experience in the world of opera. African American opera singers are called on to do so many things beyond classical music. When I was a singer, I made most of my money between December and February. And you might say, well, why is that? Well, during December, I was running around doing Christmas concerts. And then in January, Martin Luther King concerts. And then in February, Black History Month concerts. And in many of those Black History Month concerts, people want to hear the music that they identify with. But if you're performing with an orchestra, you're sort of obliged to do classical music. So you got to get something that's hip, and you got to get something that's classical. So you got a lot of classical opera singers that can not only sing classical music, not only sing opera, but they can also do blues. They can also do gospel. And they can also do spirituals, which is the classical music of African Americans. We're going to now present to you two spirituals by two of our talented competition winners. Christian Simmons is a bass baritone, and he's going to sing for you Give Me Jesus, which is arranged by a contemporary of mine who unfortunately died very young. spirituals are the folk music of African American slavery. They're the music that came out of that struggle in the Deep South, the Plantation South, and African American composers who attended the American Conservatory of Music, which was headed by Czech composer Antonín Dvořák, were consulted, were advised to take that music and from it define what would be American music, as he had done with the folk songs of his native Czechoslovakia. So now we have spirituals that have been arranged for the concert stage. You've heard one, and then you're going to hear a spiritual arrangement by one of the ultimate, I should say, arrangers of Negro spirituals, Hall Johnson from the Harlem Renaissance. Witness by Anastasia Talley. I bet you didn't know that our famous Harlemite world-class composer, Duke Ellington, actually wrote an opera. We had the opportunity of presenting this opera a few years ago at the Schomburg. This opera is based on the story of Madam C.J. Walker, who was the first African-American millionaire. She made her money doing hair and inventing beauty products for the hair and for the skin. In Duke Ellington's opera Queenie Pie, he uses a low voice, a mezzo-soprano, or a contralto, which is the lower of the women's voices. As we talk about contraltos, we cannot conclude this part of the program without speaking about famous African-American contralto, Marian Anderson, who was the first African-American to sing in the Metropolitan Opera. She made her debut at the age of 59. And the conductor at that time said, it would have to be in a role that was believable for an African American. So she was cast as the gypsy Azucena in the opera Un ballo in maschera, which is also by the Italian composer Giuseppe Verdi. She went on to make history after the Daughters of the Revolution refused to present her in a concert at Constitution Hall in Washington, D.C. And the First Lady of our country at that time invited her to do that concert, which became the first March on Washington, at the mall there in Washington, where she sang a full recital out of doors to thousands of people, far more than would have been able to hear her had the concert been done in Constitution Hall. Now that you know a little bit more about opera, we hope that you will never be intimidated by this as an art form. It's not necessarily that you will be a singer or a conductor, but perhaps you'll buy a ticket or you'll support by allowing a young person to go to the opera. There are so many ways in which opera companies like Harlem Opera can use your encouragement and support. And there probably are ways that you can think of that we have not yet thought of. Maybe you'd be a great board member to help us to raise awareness about opera in our community. Thank you for tuning in today, and we hope that you'll tune in for session number 2 of Opera for Beginners.